semi-automatic rifle. But the blame for Port Arthur must be sheeted home to Australia as well. Not only have we imported American-style violence willy-nilly into our society, but it's become entrenched and tolerated, and we've been blissfully unaware of the warning signs. Our cover story is reported by Paul Ransley.
Yeah, Roger's about 3 more shots fired from the black.
Stay here, cowboy.
A gunman firing randomly claims 25 lives.
On a shooting rampage, killing
a massacre in Australia.
With an automatic rifle, he shot at random at people in a car.
The sheer scale of this tragedy was beyond anything Australia had ever experienced, and fear mingled with the grief and sympathy we felt for the victims. If it could happen here, in a small, tight-knit community, it could happen anywhere. At any time, a crazy man's bullet could strike us down.
I think these events removed any vestigial sense of innocence that this country may have had, but in some way it was untouched by some of the individual insanities and crimes that beset other societies and beset other nations.
But we shouldn't have been surprised by this. The surprise is that there haven't been more Port Arthurs.
It's a sort of event that is a reflection of our modern society, and particularly our society which has such easy accessibility to the firearms of massive killing capabilities that were used in this event. We've been fed a recipe in recent years that one of the ways to resolve conflict is through violence. We feed that recipe to our children. We see that in our workplace environments. We're subjected to violent acts through the mass media.
The casebook of Australian mass killing already contains names like Queen Street, Hoddle Street and Strathfield. The Port Arthur outrage suggests such horrors are increasing in number and intensity.
It's an unfortunate pattern that's been repeated time after time in different parts of the world, and of course in our own country as well. It's a horrible trend, one that is international, one that certainly we are now, I suppose, on the grave cutting edge of.
The question is, can we reverse the trend? The experts say yes, and it starts with the man holding the gun. In this case, the accused is 29-year-old Martin Bryant.
There are certain red flags that, if picked up, would perhaps allow someone to intervene, and generally speaking...
Claude Menacini was a senior homicide investigator who studied with the FBI. He met and interviewed mass murderers and believes they all send out signals of their intent. We should learn to spot them.
There's never been sufficient awareness of what the key criteria or the key red flags are in relation to precipitators to violence. And I think if people were made aware of those things and act instinctively on those things, well, then we'd have early intervention and people could intervene.
And there's plenty of research into the type of person who commits these crimes.
They're usually resentful individuals who believe the world's really failed to recognise their capacities and has not given them a fair go. They have often experienced some kind of loss or some kind of blow to their self-esteem. They become increasingly despondent, angry, essentially usually decide to kill themselves, but take other people with them.
Although Martin Bryant is yet to be found guilty, he certainly fits the profile. The emerging picture is of a young man isolated and at war with the community in which he grew up.
My son said to me only yesterday that he was the sort of boy that you would feel like bashing, but because you knew he was different, you couldn't. And that's about sums it up, I think.
They felt sorry for him.
They felt sorry for him because he wasn't like them. He was different. His attitude was different and his behaviour was different. So they kept him on the outer edge of their groups, and he sort of became a bit of a loner, I think.
Roger Lana, a Port Arthur farmer, has known Bryant and his family for 18 years. They owned a shack near the beach, and Bryant would often spend his holidays there.
He used to, you know, keep on the fringes of the groups and wouldn't play with them, and they didn't like him, and he used to get annoyed with them because he wouldn't, you know, he couldn't join in. And
as a youngster, Bryant displayed a volatile nature. He was prone to antisocial behaviour, banned from local buses for harassing young girls, caught shoplifting and thrown out of the Broad Arrow Cafe, in which most of the 35 people died last Sunday.
I think he bore a grudge to those people that behaved in that way towards him. So he probably did have a chip on his shoulder towards some people.
Sunday understands that 2 of the victims, the owners of the Seascape Bed and Breakfast, Sally and David Martin, had refused to sell Bryant a nearby block of land, and he was angry about it.
I think he was, in some ways, he may have been taking a revenge against various incidents that occurred here in the past. I don't know, I can't answer for him. As a teenager, he caused a few problems for me, but I didn't I dealt with him through his mother rather than deal with him directly. I used to always go and talk to his mother, and she used to be able to control him to a certain extent. His father certainly was able to control him.
When Bryant's parents separated, his lifestyle became increasingly bizarre. The teenager was befriended by a rich spinster, Helen Harvey, whose wealth came from the Tattersalls' fortune. She owned a large house in Hobart, and he moved in with her.
She seemed to have really taken him under her wing. Martin was, as I said, Martin was a little strange anyway, but yeah, she seemed to take him under her wing, and he did exactly what she wanted him to do.
In 1991, they moved to Copping, halfway between Hobart and Port Arthur. The RSPCA found between 8 and 10 dogs living in the house in shocking conditions.
We removed those dogs and brought them over here to the RSPCA. The Hobart City Council Health Department went in and they made a clean up the mess.
And there was quite a bit of mess.
Quite a bit of mess, yeah, and feces and the sort of thing all through the place. It was a real tip. Martin was always there with Miss Harvey. He never used to like us coming there at all. He got quite nasty about it.
My sister-in-law lives up the road here, her and a daughter. She went over to, after they first moved in, because they used to buy small fruit off them, the people that owned the place before. Anyway, they moved it, went over and introduced. He walked back up the lane behind them, told them never to go back because he'd likely to do them in.
Barry Featherston lived next door to Bryant and Helen Harvey. He too was warned off with threats of being killed.
Oh, he was a real nutter. Oh, I was very glad when he moved out of the area.
A year after they arrived, the pair were involved in a car accident. Helen Harvey died. She left her fortune to the young man. Bryant's father moved into the house, but according to their neighbours, the relationship was stormy.
Well, his father done himself in, or was supposed to have done himself in. I think there was suspicious circumstances there. And they found him in the waterhole just below where Martin lived. He'd shot himself and chucked himself in the waterhole at the same time, apparently.
Bryant returned to the Hobart property with plenty of money and nothing to do but spend it. And he began to display signs that set alarm bells ringing amongst those who met him.
It was as though he was sort of coming across onto us about things. More with younger children.
This man was employed to do some work on the house and prefers not to be identified. But he recalls that Bryant constantly talked about sex with young girls, including an 11-year-old neighbour.
Yes, he made a number of times, and not only the neighbour, other children that he said around the area that he said he'd followed and tracked and what he would like to do.
He'd actually followed them?
Yeah, that's what he had told me. He reckons what he wanted to do with younger children, but then he'd laugh. He'd laugh like, not a proper laugh, but a laugh as though he wanted to put me off as though he was only joking, but he wasn't joking. And we sort of walk away as though, is this bloke for real or isn't he for real? And that's when it started to spook us.
There was also other disturbed behaviour.
He was sort of like a roller coaster on a lot of fast dips, he'd giggle at you 1 minute, and then he'd be sensible the next minute. And he used to invite us into the kitchen. That's as far as we got. And then he'd kick us out of the kitchen. He'd get dressed up in like neat casual, real neat casual, good pub gear, neat shoes, well done up, and he'd be upstairs doing weightlifting. I've done a fair bit of weightlifting myself with sport and that, and I know the sound and what he was doing. Then he'd come downstairs.
And he'd be fully dressed and
fully dressed,
going
and come
out
downstairs, sweat would be running off his back, off his face, and he'd be frothing at the mouth. And he'd say things to me like, would you get this pumped up when you're having sex with your woman? And then he'd run back inside.
Yet none of the people we spoke with went to the authorities with their concerns. Claude Minicini says that's common.
Because the hardest thing in the world for us as individuals to accept is that there are people out there who are basically evil.
And it's unfortunate if the individual becomes a mass killer. Minicini argues, controversially, that we must learn to recognise the red flags and alert health and law enforcement professionals.
But the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. That doesn't mean that an individual has to be subjected to persecution. All I'm saying is, let's inquire. Let's satisfy ourselves that we're not going, that this behaviour is not indicative of a negative future action. And because of who we tend to confide in, people tend to confide in clergy, people confide in their mental health professional, people confide in their doctors. Sometimes we need to put those privilege issues aside for the better of society.
Weighing the rights of individuals against the rights of the community will always be an issue in our response to Port Arthur, and the loudest argument will be over guns.
The first and most obvious thing is to ensure that people like this don't have access to the automatic and semi-automatic weapons that allow them to slaughter large numbers of people. If that man had been standing there with a knife or standing there even with a shotgun, there would have been a limit to the devastation that he could have caused. Putting into the hands of these people who are often fascinated by weapons, fascinated with violence, the instruments of mass destruction is just stupid.
There is no greater, more persuasive argument in favour of tighter gun laws than what happened last Sunday.
He ate half of his meal and then bent over, got to his bag and opened fire.
It sounded like a gas explosion. That was what we initially thought it was, or an explosion of some sort in the restaurant. And then somebody came out and said, he's killing everybody, and run.
And I saw the man with a gun came out with a gun, and he was running after me and my daughter. We couched behind the cars. He went back to the bus. He shot the bus driver and the people there.
In the area where my wife Gwen was, 5 was shot dead there. We've got the 2 counter assistants, my wife, and there were 2 others, 2 menfolk.
Some people died in my arms. I ran out to the bus then because I realised I hadn't checked the bus. I got on the bus and I'm pretty sure his name, I forget now, but a man was there, and he was a tough old cook, he was, because he's still alive. His wife was holding him. And there's another poor lady down the back, and I went to help her, but she died also.
The guy was saying, don't shoot, don't, you know, everything's okay, or something like that, and the other, get in a boot, get in a boot. And he was waving, sort of waving, and I thought, why doesn't he hit him, why doesn't he kick him, why doesn't he? But he then went into the boot, he slammed the boot and just went and shot the wife, just the quickest shot. She just went, smashed the window straight through, and one was straight in the heart.
It was just a matter of just trying to find people that were that weren't so badly hurt to just travel next, because most people were gone.
A number of people were shot in the arms and legs, and you know, there's some gunshot wounds to the head, and you know, just about any part of the body you wish to name, we found some pellets.
At the beginning of last week, it appeared our politicians would be forced to recognise the need for uniform national gun laws. But by week's end, that looked in doubt. Fearful of the gun lobby, Queensland was pulling back. And in New South Wales, bitter squabbling erupted in the Parliament.
You should be damn well ashamed of yourselves. What a bunch of hypocrites.
That's the bottom line, isn't it? Dead bodies for votes. You make me sick.
It's like in an afternoon my whole life's just been erased. Every possible thing that I've done through my life to succeed and to do something for my wife and children has just been taken away in a very short space of time, and it's hard to...
Walter Meekak lost his wife and 2 daughters, aged 3 and 6, to the gunman.
The one thing I can't reiterate too much is that the fact that that sort of carnage could not possibly happen without people having access to guns that were automatic or of assault-type potential, because there's near the Tollbooth there was 3 people together on the ground, and the thought of my 6-year-old Alana running, she's behind a stump and she's still dead, curled up there, it just makes me feel very sick inside.
But the lessons from Port Arthur are about more than just an angry and disturbed man with a lethal weapon. And we ignore those lessons at our peril, as we'll see after the break, when we speak with a man who spent his whole life training others to kill.
And in ever more quantities of these homemade sociopaths walk out on the street, kill reflexively without even thinking, and then show absolutely no remorse for it. And we say, my God, what's wrong with him? He killed without thinking. He shows no remorse for it. And we have the audacity to ask what's wrong with him when we taught him to kill and we taught him to like it. And now we, as a civilization, across many nations, are paying the price for it.